One thing that struck me that I think is significant in terms of our question about meaning and interpretation and so on is that if you look at the individual statements by an individual person, one at a time, if you just look at one person's statement, there, we're there, we're there, they're not very meaningful at all. So the meaning is in their interrelationships together across people's utterances. And so Murat was pointing out in the previous page of the transcript that the words themselves are connected across people. So he looked at the words same, 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 same. The different people are using the same words and using them somewhat differently and so on. And the contrast between the meaning of the word same and the meaning of the word different is really integral to the whole discussion that's going on here. Looking for rockets that are the same except for one thing that's different. That's central to what they're trying to figure out about the list. And so the different people's utterances are tied together by the use of the same language. And also you see that that individually, something like just say number 2 or yes it is, it's not meaningful in itself. It's only meaningful within that group context as a response to things that came before, as references to things in the situation, like the list of rockets, and as projections about things that we as a group can do later. Like he says, so if you compare 2 and 1, that's a projection about maybe the group should compare rocket 1 and rocket 2. So it's something that we could do as a group next or later. And they move from one position, they move as a group from a position opposed to the mentor, where they all say no, to here where they're all agreeing. I see, they all agree with it. But to me, the interesting thing is that when you look at it, these are bits and pieces, as the writer uses the term, that moreover are meaningless by themselves as bits and pieces. It's like you have a whole thing and you smash it into little bits and pieces. The bits and pieces are worthless by themselves. And we often think about communication, and traditionally we think about communication and interaction as individuals making statements that are meaningful, and another person receiving that statement and interpreting it and answering with another meaningful statement. But these people are interacting with statements that are not really meaningful by themselves. The meaning of it is all through the intertwining of what's said within the context of the group, within the context of what the group is doing in relation to the simulation and so on, and in relation to what they're doing with the mentor's question and so on. All of those things in the whole activity that they're involved in go together to create the meaningfulness of these individual utterances.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
You just mentioned that there is a projective nature.
Right.
Very last thing.
For instance, with this one.
I'm just curious, what happened later on during the discussion? I mean, were they able to replicate this sort of analysis?
Well, right here.
Okay, I guess.
See, he says it, and then he goes and he does it. So once there's agreement in the group, when the whole group has congealed around this understanding of what's going on, that immediately frees it for Jamie to go and do what he proposed here. And he starts comparing them, and you can see on the tape that this paper that he's been playing with is this data sheet that has the data of the heights of the different rockets. And you can see him look at the sheet as he's saying this, and concluding that the rocket with the rounded nose cone is better. So now they can solve their problem. Until now, they weren't able to solve the problem because they didn't see what was going on in the list as a group. So even, it's possible that, for instance, you could argue that Jamie saw it originally. But they had to go through this and get the whole group to see what was in the list, to see the meaning of the list. They had to go through this process and establish that meaning for the group. And then the group could move on and solve the problem.
I guess my question was somehow related to the Zama personal development thing. So you scaffolded the discussion somehow, and they were able to discover it. But I was just wondering.
The mentor posed the question, can't you see a certain pair of rockets in the list? And then they were able to go through this collaborative process to build their collaborative knowing about the list through this process that we can analyze, as Alan did, and see how they built that knowing that they could then use to solve the problem.
After that point, did they work on other attributes? I'm just
yes. Yeah, then they figured out the effect of each of the different attributes, and they summed them up, and they predicted what would happen for the rocket 8 that they had never fired based on the differences of the different fins, the different nose cone, the different body texture. And they made a scientific prediction based on that.